Hi, this is Jeneane Lunn, and I'm painting on location in Vermont. And obviously, I'm doing a voiceover, so sadly, you won't get to hear all the cows that were lowing out in the field while we were drawing, or the trucks that were rushing by right behind us. But hopefully, I can concentrate and tell you what I'm doing. So, I am working on the Lux Archival Paper. The size of this paper is 8 by 10. It is white, which I used to think was a really big drawback, but the fact is it covers so well that it's only a pain in the neck right in the beginning because I'm not used to how my colors look on white paper, so everything looks too dark in the beginning, but you need to just get over that and get it all covered, and then everything will be fine. So the first thing I did was I drew my little outline around my paper to mark off what part would be under the frame. And now I'm using my charcoal to sort of block it in. And I do like to draw in masses. So I'm putting in where the darks are, the darkest darks. It's hard for me to judge things just based on an outline. I need to see the shapes. So that's what I'm up to now. And I'm using soft vine charcoal. And the good thing about the soft vine charcoal is that it's easy to erase. Not so easy on this paper. Actually, you can't really erase it at all. So you want to be kind of sure about your drawing a little bit because it is hard to make major changes. It just doesn't come off. But I'm just kind of blurring it in with my fingers so I can see the big shape of the darks in the painting against the lights. So I'm not trying to do everything. I want my drawing to give me a good sense of how it's going to look as a painting and not just like trying to draw every little detail at once. So this is really part of the composition stage. I used my viewfinder to decide on my composition, and I am sorry, I feel like my photograph is just not very good. The photograph that I took to use for this demo. But maybe the truth is I just really change things a lot when I start drawing, and even when I'm working from reality, I don't exactly do what's out there. And of course, as soon as the painting was finished and I'd taken photographs of it and put it away, or just on the verge of putting it away, I realized that I had too many lines running in the same direction downhill toward the right. So that's something that needs to be fixed on the painting if I were to frame it. So you can also see when you see my head in the picture, you can see where the sun is coming from. So I set it up so that the sun would not be shining on my paper, even though that was kind of a pain in the neck, and meant that I was kind of turned around backwards to how I wanted to look. And so now I'm ready to start my color, and I felt like there was some pink in the sky, so I just made it a lot pink. I sort of never hold back. If I'm going to make mistakes, I want to make such big mistakes that I can see how to correct them. And for once, I did remember to lift up my clip there and actually get the color under the clip. Okay, well, so the sky is not really that pink. So now I'm going to come back over it with some blue. All right, well, so I must not have thought that was just exactly what it should be. So I've added a slightly greener blue there. You might not be able to tell that, but I'm trying to keep the warmth in the sky. It was early morning, and you see the light on my hat? You can really see the color of the light. It's very yellowy, pinky. Um, so this is kind of a long time to work on the sky in a way, but the sky is so important to the rest of the picture because my next layer for the mountains for Camel's Hump, that's going to touch the sky, and the color I make it really depends on what the sky color is. So I do tend to start with the sky and then work down from there because I can compare the next area of color right to the sky instead of skipping down to the foreground and having all that white paper in between. So that was like 4 colors I used on the sky. That's a nice thing about this paper. It's got more grit than the Pastel Premier, and that's what I was looking for, was a more gritty paper. So now, you know, I'm pretty sure that's too dark to have for those mountains, but I wanted to have the purple in there. And like I say, everything looks too dark on this paper when you start because the paper is white. And then I tried using that color on the closer level of mountains just to see, but then I realized that no, that color would be more appropriate for the far area of mountains, to send them back more. So that was, you can see that little scribble on that closer area of mountains that of the light green, but that didn't seem like it worked. And so now I'm back to the sky because the sky seems too dark. So I'm trying to lighten it up. So that's the 5th color now I put on the sky. All right, so moving on to the field. And I decided just to go ahead and use that color all over the field and then make variations in the fields as I'm trying to move from the front to the back. And you can see I'm sort of forgetting to go clear to the edges, but you definitely want to go clear to the edges before you spray, otherwise your colors aren't the same. So here what I'm doing then is lightening up that farther field, cooling it down some, and hoping that's going to help, you know, bring the forward field forward, but also maybe create this sense of unity throughout the fields instead of starting them with completely different colors. And the other thing I've been thinking about lately is just that, you know, it's complicated and you get started with so many colors and you're trying to juggle so many different colors and compare them to each other. How could I make my start even more simple by maybe doing what I did there, start the field, the whole field one color, and then come back and make modifications. So there I'm back working on the mountains and trying to get variation between those two edges of those two colors of the mountains and the sky. And my drawing is getting pretty out of control. Like, I don't know why Camel's Hump just feels like the hardest thing I've ever had to draw. But anyway, so I'm trying not to worry about my drawing right now and just focus on color. And anytime I want, I can come back with my soft charcoal and redraw. So because I'm painting outside, a hat is just so important, and because I need to have my canvas, my painting, my paper turned away from the sun, that means oftentimes I'm looking toward the sun. So I need a hat to block the sky and the sun out of my eyes. I think it really helps to not paint too dark when you're wearing a hat. I also thought it was interesting how blue the paper looked in the video before I put any color on top of it. And that's because that, you know, I'm just catching skylight on my paper and the skylight is blue. So when you're painting landscape, when you're outside on a sunny day, you have 2 light sources. You have the sun, which is lighting up all your lights, and then the sky, which is lighting up all your lights, but also all your shadows. So there's places where there's no sun, there's places where there's only sky, there's places where there's sun and sky, and there's places like in the really deep shadows where there's no sun at all. So if you think of the sun, you know, it's super warm. So those are the yellows, the pinks, the reds, the oranges, and then the sky on a sunny day is very cool. So a lot of blues in your shadows. Not to make a rule, but if things are going badly for you, what you can do is just think about that. Like if you're not being able to make it look like a sunny day, you could say to yourself, well, do I have my lights yellowy enough and do I have my shadows blue enough? So I feel like I said some confusing things, so see if I can say it better. There's places where the sun like shines through the leaves, And that is only sunlight. That's like transmitted light. It's like you're actually seeing light shining at you through the trees. And I just find that one of the hardest things to do, is that light shining through the leaves, that backlighting. And then you have places like the grass, the fields, where the sun is shining and the sky is shining. So you can't just like make the grass bright yellow, which was what I used to always do. No, it's some sort of combo of those two light sources. And then some of the vertical planes in the trees are just really dark, and they're maybe not getting any sunlight at all, and maybe they aren't getting any skylight either. So that's one reason why sometimes the trees, the shadows, like in the verticals, like in the trees, will look so much darker than the shadows on the ground, because the shadows in the trees aren't getting much skylight, but the shadows on the ground are completely influenced by the color of the sky. So anyway, try not to worry about that junk, because the thing is, when you're out there, you just want to be looking, see what you can see, and only think about that other stuff if you feel like your painting's not sunny enough. And one of the biggest problems people have with painting outdoors is their paintings are too dark. When they bring them indoors, their paintings are too dark. And that's because there's nowhere indoors that has the kind of light that you have outdoors. And that is why so many artists use an umbrella. Although I've got to say, I keep trying to use one, but it keeps like knocking over my easel. I spent a lot of money on umbrellas and I'm not happy with anything. So, yeah. Anyway, so people, they use the umbrella to emulate the feeling of being indoors, and to create more shade for their painting. But I do what I can by turning my easel away from the sun, so the sun does not shine on my paper. And then what you need to do is, you can never really tell until you get indoors if you've painted it too dark. You need to bring it indoors and look at it in the kind of light it's going to be hanging in, and see if it looks too dark. And if it looks too dark, well, then you can lighten it up. Although I just want to say, I hardly ever do that. I just feel like, well, it is what it is. But especially, I used to do a lot of landscapes that I worked on more than one day. And in between the two times I worked on it, I would bring them inside and see if I thought they were too dark. And then the next day I would try to lighten it up. But I don't generally work on my paintings that are done outdoors indoors. I usually just feel like, yeah, that was it. It was that day, it was that time, it was that moment, and now it's over. And one reason for that is, I've seen a lot of paintings that were like, oh, studies for indoor paintings. They were studies that were done outside. And I just always feel like those studies look better than the big paintings that were created indoors from the study. So, and honestly, just rather work from a photograph when I'm indoors than try to work from one of my paintings. And that doesn't mean that's a rule you should follow. That's just my preference. Okay, so I've almost got it all laid in. And another thing about a sunny day is that there's really strong contrast. So if you look at your painting and all your values, which is just the relative lightness or darkness of a color, that's known as value. If you think about black and white photographs or black and white movies, those are just about value. They don't have color, so all you're reading is lights and darks. And then when you're working in color, each color has a value also, like either a dark value or a light value or an in-between value. So if your painting looks too kind of in the middle, like the values are all too close together on a sunny day, then that's something else to look at, is do you need to make more contrast? So when I think of like the hallmarks of a sunny day, it's strong value contrast, a lot of yellows in the lights and blues in the shadows where the sky is reflected. So finally, I got something, the sixth or seventh color I put on the sky, I added that yellow in, and I feel like now it's starting to look like the sky is sunny. I feel like the painting, the landscape part, looks pretty sunny, and that's because I think of the strong value contrast. So when you're trying to create distance, which is a big part of what landscape painting, that's one of the big problems, creating variety of texture and then trying to create these big distances, because you're never painting these kind of distances when you're doing still life or portraits. So, I mean, we're talking miles here. So how do you make things appear to be farther away? So if you think about your tools of painting, and the first tool is composition. So I set it up. So I walked around in this spot where I was a bit. I try not to take too long because, you know, you can just agonize over it so much that you use up all the time you actually had to paint with fooling around trying to figure out what to paint. And I used to have rules about this to help me. So I would carry my stuff around with me wherever I was looking, because I found it was easier to make a decision more quickly if I was carrying a bunch of junk than if I was just walking around going, oh, I don't know, over here, over there. And I use my viewfinder. That's what really helps me when you're confronted with just big open spaces. A viewfinder shows you exactly what can be in your painting. And the other rule I used to have was that if I went to one spot, like I drove to one spot where I thought I wanted to paint, and that didn't work out, I was only allowed to go to one more spot. So if I went to that second spot, I had to paint there no matter what. So I don't know, these kind of things sort of help me not be so indecisive. Okay, so back to creating depth and using the tools of painting to create depth. So your first tool is composition. So I figured out what I wanted to paint, and I looked at it and I tried to make things overlap in my composition, not just one layer that's really far away lined up with a layer that's closer. So things are overlapping, and that immediately creates a sense of distance, because when something's overlapping something else, then that first thing is in front. And then with the drawing, the same thing. I'm trying not to let the top of the tree line up with the top of the mountain or the edge of the field. I'm trying to have things overlapping. And also in drawing, when things are closer to you, they're bigger. So making things get bigger as you come closer. So like right back where I'm working now, that's a whole stand of trees. But over on the right, that's going to be the goldenrod. So right now you can't really tell. Those things look kind of equal distance except for the drawing part. Okay, and then colors tend to get more muted in the distance. So they're not as vibrant. And the warm colors tend to drop out in the distance. So that's why the mountains further away look less yellow. But this does not mean you should just think that's the way it is. You always want to look and see what's going on, and then try stuff. Just don't be afraid to try stuff. There's a painting, oh gosh, I can't think of that guy's name, but I think it's William Brandt, and he was a California impressionist, and he has a painting of California where the sky is about the color that I used in the field. It's a really rich yellow ochre, and it's just an incredible painting. And I just think the courage it took. I mean, it's not, you know, bungee jumping, but still, it takes a lot of courage to make a sky that bright, yellowy ochre color. So you want to just allow yourself to be surprised by what's out there and go with the surprises, not say, oh no, that can't be true, because that's not typical. Okay, so stronger colors in the foreground, more muted colors in the distance, usually, and then more value contrast in the foreground and more muted colors in the distance. I mean, more muted values in the distance. So not as much contrast in the distance. So you can see that Camel's Hump just looks like basically one color. But you know, if you were standing right there on Camel's Hump, you'd be seeing the dark, rich greens and the bright lights too, where the sun was hitting the trees. But because it's so far away, you know, you can't really see that. Okay, so now I'm spraying it with a fixative, with Workable Fixative. I'm using the Blick Workable Fixative, and I spray it until I see it get darker. And then you know, it was a warm summer day, so it's dry already. Doesn't take very long. And I spray it so I can have a new surface to work on. So like I'd already had like about 7 colors in the sky. So what happens is it starts to feel kind of squirrely to me. It starts to feel like the colors are blending too much and not layering anymore. And the other reason I might spray, so you see, I've worked on this 20 minutes now and I already sprayed it. So I'm working pretty fast, and you have to because there's a big light changes outdoors. So I figure I have about 2 hours to finish a painting. And with this new paper, I can do in an hour what it was taking me 2 hours to do on the Pastel Premier. So right away I go back to the sky after I spray it, and I'm lightening it up. So I put in some yellow, and now I put in some pink. And if your painting is too dark, the best thing you can do is lighten the sky, because the sky is generally the lightest thing in your painting. It's not always, but it often is. So if you lighten the sky, that gives you more room, value-wise, that gives you more room to lighten the other colors. So I tend to work in that same order again, starting with the sky and working down. Another good trick is stare at the horizon when you're outside and then look up, and you'll see how the sky higher is much more blue, and on the horizon there's a lot more atmosphere, I guess, or you know, those pinks and yellows and stuff. So I try to do that. If I see it, I try to do that tonal shift from what it looks like close to the land to up higher. So also you'll see usually that at the zenith, at the top of the sky, it's much more cobalt blue, which is a much colder blue. And then down near the horizon, it's more the cerulean blue, which is kind of what I have going on in my painting. Okay, so now, you know, Camel's Hump, out of control. So I've got my soft charcoal and I'm just trying to redraw it. Basically, I'm doing a contour drawing. And you can redraw anytime you want. That's the great thing about the charcoal, soft bind charcoal. Now I'm just trying to add the sky back in and not mess up the drawing. So I do kind of try to keep the colors I'm using a little bit separate, but also I don't want to just always pick up the same color. So I'm a little careless in a way, because I really want to, hopefully I'm going to keep picking colors that'll make it better and not just using the same color over and over. That's another thing about the spraying, though, is that once it's sprayed, it darkens the painting so much, which is why some people hate the spray. But I like it because darks are kind of a problem in pastels. So it darkens it, and it kind of doubles the colors you have, because when you put something back on, even if you use the same exact color you used before, it won't really look the same. And that's why it's so important to get out all the way out to the edges before you spray. You can see I missed one place, but most of that would be under the frame. All the time what I'm looking for are the relationships between the colors. Like, and I'm just doing whatever crosses my mind. I'm not thinking very much. I'm working pretty fast. This is because I wasn't talking when I was doing this. This is very much the speed I work at on a normal, when I'm out by myself, not doing this. So in each area, I'm trying to make it better. And then when I feel like I've made it better, I move on to the next area. It's important to have a lot of blues. More important to have a lot of blues than a lot of greens. Like in green, you can see I used some rusty colors, I used some blue. I didn't limit myself just to greens. But in the sky, you just need, you don't want to muck up your sky. You don't want to get it dirty or, looking, yeah, dirty, I guess. You want it to be nice and clear, especially on a day like this one was. You want it to be nice and clear and clean. And to do that, you need a lot of different values of blues and kinds of blues. Warmer blues, sort of yellowy. Oh, that was interesting. Did you see how that changed the color on the painting when I put my arm up there and it got light on it? And I've pretty much given up, trying to make things perfect. So I'm just always asking for better. And not really thinking when I'm painting. It kind of sounds like I am when you hear me do a voiceover or something, or when I'm talking when I am painting. But the truth is, like, words are not going through my mind, except sometimes, like, oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. But mostly it's just kind of just reacting, oh, to that. I mean, not saying it really, but just feeling it. But I think in the beginning, I used to talk to myself a lot more. So you might be saying to yourself something like, oh, I didn't get that dark enough. Oh, those three areas, there's three layers of mountains back there, and they're not coming forward or receding enough. And you also might notice that I don't really work too long anywhere. You want to keep moving because you're trying to figure out the relationships of the color. And you can't really say that that color in the background is perfect until you see what the colors in the foreground are. So, so keep moving. Don't worry. Don't think. Don't fret. Just um, just let's see, what would it be? Just try stuff. It's all an experiment. It's an exercise in curiosity. um, what would happen if I did this? And sometimes it's kind of terrible, but if you don't take big chances, you won't know. And compared to so many things in life, painting is not really a big chance. You're not going to fall off a cliff because you use the wrong color back there. Um, yeah, it's all going to be okay. And when you use fixative, like when I use fixative, wow, I wish I hadn't done that. When I use fixative, it really means that I can take big chances, big risk in my color choices, and still, after it's sprayed, I can get back, or I can make it better. And if it doesn't work out, like, so what? Because you definitely learn as much or more from the mistakes you make and the things that don't work as you do from the things that work well. Unfortunately, I think we all pay a lot more attention to the things that don't go well than the things that do go well. And that's what you need, is to pay attention to know how to get to be better as an artist. And if you don't push the envelope, then you want to always be growing as an artist, not just stagnant. It's why being a beginner is sort of so much more advantageous than being an experienced painter. That experience leads you to do what you know and not what you see. Experience kind of kills, well, maybe not kills, but it dampens creativity and the sense of wonder and curiosity that you might have about the world. It's like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. It's like kind of when you know the name of a bird, like before you've figured out what bird it is, you might really be looking at it and thinking about, what are those marks on its head? What are its wings doing when it flies? But once you've identified it, it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's one of those. So you don't want to get that way in your painting, and it's also kind of good practice for life, that you don't want to be blasé about stuff like, oh yeah, that's a green tree. And when you walk out to do a landscape in Vermont in the summer, honest to God, it's pretty much like, whoa, there is so much green. Oh yeah, and back to like creating distance. Another thing that you have a lot more of in the foreground is texture. So one thing you can make stuff look further away is by making it flatter. So you can see how little texture I have in the mountains in the distance and how much more texture I have in the trees up close. And I still have not made the goldenrod really come forward yet. So I'm hoping that I'm going to make that better. So as things get closer to you, you're going to have richer colors, stronger colors, more value contrast, greater difference between the lights and the darks, and you're going to have bigger strokes and more, and then all those things are going to translate into more detail. Yay, she finally put in some yellow. So you can see how that pops that forward right away. And now it doesn't feel like it's part of those trees in the distance so much. But you can also see why I wanted to wait to do that, because I didn't want to have to work around all those little yellow things. Some colors you just have to put in right away, like reds. You can't, if those were red flowers, you would need to put those in from the beginning. But I was pretty confident I could get the yellow to go on top of the greens. And also it's some, more expensive, softer brand of pastels than the Rembrandts I'm generally using. I don't really know how many colors I use um, in a painting, but I think it must be between, maybe 20 and 30 different colors. And especially if you consider that after it's sprayed, every color I use looks different than it did before it was sprayed. So, maybe 30 colors. But I do have a pretty big box, although I limit it to just one box because weight is something I really care about now. I used to just lug so much junk out there, but and I just don't want it to be too heavy. And I got into that from painting so much in Italy and not having a car and having to walk everywhere. So you see how what I just did right behind the yellow flowers made that tree pop forward because I increased the value contrast back there. I used a cool color, which you would hope would go back, but the value must not have been really accurate. I hope I fixed that. And I'm not really interested in copying the details. I'm trying to create an illusion. I'm trying to do sort of as little work as possible, and make the viewer have to do some work translating things into reality. And I do feel like it's good when there's room for the viewer in the painting, when the viewer is a part of the painting as well as the painter. Um, it's hard to paint outdoors. It's much harder than painting indoors from a photograph. I mean, photographs are already in two dimensions. The landscape is in 3 dimensions. So, it's just much more complicated. And that's another reason why the viewfinder is so useful, because in a weird way, when you look through your viewfinder, it kind of flattens everything, and it's almost like you're looking at it as a photograph. Um, but it is so worth it to paint outside. Especially this day, I was out with two really good friends, and the cows were in the meadow, and they were so talking to us the whole time. It was a beautiful day. It was low humidity, just everything about it. It was just my favorite kind of day, and my favorite thing to do on my favorite kind of day with some of my favorite people. And I do slow down some as I get more to the finish. The, you know, the choices, I've got to be a little more careful about the choices I make, because uh, I probably wouldn't do something too crazy right now, although I might. If that's the best thing about, if things aren't going well, if you're not liking your painting, then that's the time when you can do something really off the wall that might make a huge difference. But usually by now, I'm either liking it or hating it. And so I'm starting to move into that, ooh, I don't want to wreck it phase. And you have to be careful about that, because once you get really into the I don't want to wreck it, and you're not taking chances anymore, it's probably just as well to quit. And my goal in painting always is to be a better painter. It's not just to do another painting. Heaven knows I've got too many paintings lying around. But I'm hoping that every painting I do will help me to be a better painter, more observant, more willing to take risk, more, just, I don't know, a more expansive person, a person who isn't afraid, a brave person. And it's a good place to practice bravery, because there's not really too much risk except, to your self esteem. Well, I really wish I was going to fix that blue tree right behind the goldenrod. Do you see how that pops forward? So putting that stuff in the foreground helps me make decisions about the background too. It's pretty hard to make a decision, a final decision. So you can see what I decided I had to do was lighten that up a little bit right behind those to push that back behind the goldenrod in the front. So a lot of times the answers to the background are in the foreground, and the answers to the foreground are in the background. So you can't just look at the foreground and make the decision. You have to compare it to the background. Come on, fix that blue tree. yet. So there's about 10 more minutes left here of me working on this one. And I'm sure I could have worked longer and made it better, but I decided I just wanted to start another one. And so I didn't film that one just to give myself a break, and just to be able to really immerse myself and enjoy the experience. I don't worry, I mean, I worry a lot if I'm talking while I'm painting, but this was just, I knew I was going to do a voiceover because the cows. But still, when you're filming, it's kind of intrusive on your painting process. So a lot of times that's what I opt for. If I can be outside for 2 or 3 hours, I'd rather do a couple of paintings than just work on the same one. And after a while, you just can't see what you're doing anymore anyway, if you just work too long on a painting. And when I'm outdoors, I hate to take the time to, I just want to go do something else. I don't want to take the time to think about it, to walk around and come back. I just, like I say, it just is what it is. So again, the paper I'm working on is the Lux Archival. I bought it from Dakota Pastels. This is an 8 by 10. The paper was white. But now I don't think that's a problem. And I use soft vine charcoal or willow, either one, to draw with. My pastels are mostly Rembrandts, although I do have a few other brands like Great American. I can't remember what. But if you go to Dakota Pastels, they have a really nice color chart, and it's or a nice chart of pastels by how soft they are, which is really helpful. The Rembrandts are the hardest ones I use. Occasionally I might have some loose new pastels floating around, and sometimes I do use them, but mostly Rembrandts are really my favorite because they're not too soft, because I can do many layers and many combinations of colors before I'm locked out of the paper. The fixative I use is the Blick or well, it's not odorless, but maybe it says it is, but workable fixative. You want to be sure you get workable fixative. That's the key word, workable. Yes, it smells really bad. I would never spray it indoors. I try to spray with the wind. In this case, luckily it wasn't a windy day, so I was able to spray it right on the easel, which I wanted to do so I didn't mess up the recording. Yeah, what else do I use? And what I have is I have a little pad of tracing paper that's like maybe 9 by 12, and I put my finished works, I keep my paper that I haven't worked on in that pad of tracing paper, and I put my finished works in between those pages of tracing paper, and then every now and then I take that into the studio and transfer them to other pads of tracing paper. Geez, I wish I'd fixed that tree. Now I'm going to have to fix that tree. I'm going to have to go back and fix that tree. And there's another thing I really have to fix. I don't know if my easel it looks so tilted in the photograph, so I don't know if it was so tilted when I was working on it. But on my far right-hand side, I need to make the mountain range come up a little bit, because it's just, when I look at the painting straight on in the final photograph I took of it, all the edges of the mountain, the edges of the field, they're just all running downhill too much in the same direction. So if I was going to work on this a little more, like if I decided I wanted to frame it, those are the things I would change. Oh, I made the tree better. Yay! Okay, now that tree stays back better. Okay, wow, that makes me feel better. I was worried. So I really encourage you to get outside and paint. And if you're a little too shy to do it by yourself, go with some friends. And the great thing about having to meet friends is that it keeps you from like, you know, chickening out and not going. And it's just there's so many other things that can get in the way of going out and painting. But in these times, I feel like I need to paint some because it's just the thing that I can't think about the condition of the world while I'm painting. I can't think about anything, it's just doing it. So I really wish you some happy days painting outdoors. And I really learned that gray days are great days to paint also. Um, yeah, the colors are so interesting on a gray day. And that is one of the really important things about painting outdoors is that you get to experience all those different light effects. Okay, so thank you very much.